The sky was brass. It had been brass for 200 days, perhaps more. Eleanor Carter, known only as Nell, had stopped counting the days. She counted fence posts. She counted rounds for her rifle. She counted the hours between the meager hauls of water from the ditch she shared with old man Whitlock. This was the Arizona Territory, or perhaps New Mexico. The maps kept changing as the railroad men drew new lines. The year was 1877, or near enough to it. The railroad was coming, and that changed everything. The wind never stopped. It did not cool. It scoured. It blew from the south, carrying the smell of iron rust and alkali dust. It tasted of failure. The drought had sucked the color from the land, leaving shades of gray and bleached brown. The mesas in the distance were purple bruises against the horizon. Nell drove the post maul down. The vibration shot through her worn gloves, jarring the bones in her wrists. She was stringing the new barbed wire, a vicious invention. All metal thorns. It was expensive. It had cost her the last of the credit she had in town, but it was necessary. Her homestead was a square of defiance, 40 acres of grit, baking in the sun. It was lodged against Whitlock's larger ranch, and more importantly, it shared the aquifer. His well was deep, driven by a windmill that groaned day and night, a constant reminder of what she lacked. Her own well had gone to sulphurous mud the summer her husband died. Tom had been dead 2 years. He had died not from a snake or the drought, but from an argument over a calf that was not even theirs. He was accused of rustling. In this territory, an accusation from the right man was a death sentence. The law, the paper law from the capital, had arrived 3 days after the burial, full of formal apologies. Nell worked like a man because the land demanded it. She wore her dead husband's canvas trousers, cinched tight with a leather belt. Her hair was braided and tucked under a flat-brimmed hat. She was 28 years old, but felt closer to 50. She spoke like someone who had learned that words were useless currency. Belief was a luxury. Love, she had decided, was the most elaborate lie of all. It promised softness in a world made of stone and thorns. The clack of shod hooves on stone broke the rhythm of her work. She did not turn quickly. She finished the swing of the maul, driving the staple into the cedar post. Only then did she straighten, wiping the sweat and grime from her forehead with her forearm. She rested one hand, casually, on the stock of the Winchester she always kept leaning against the wagon. 6 riders. They were not neighbors. Neighbors did not ride 6 deep just to say hello. They stopped 30 yards away, just outside the line of her new fence. The man in the lead was Wade Harlan. He always looked freshly laundered. Even in the dust, he wore a city hat, which was ridiculous out here, but on him it looked like a threat. He was the railroad's man. He was the cattleman's muscle. He was the shadow that fell between the sun and the land. "Mrs. Carter," he called. His voice was smooth, like oiled leather. Nell waited. She did not offer a greeting. She would not waste the moisture. Harlan dismounted, walking to the new fence line. He touched one of the barbs with a gloved finger. "This is sharp stuff. Vicious. You plan on keeping the whole world out." "Just what does not belong inside," Nell said. Her voice was rough from the dust. "That is the thing about property, ma'am," Harlan said, smiling. His teeth were very white. "The lines are always moving. The railroad has its charter. We are bringing progress, a new artery for the nation." "It looks like a scar from here," she said. Harlan's smile did not waver. "Progress needs water. The surveyors have mapped the aquifer. It runs right under this dry patch of yours, feeds the spring over on Whitlock's land. The railroad needs that spring." "Then the railroad should talk to Mr. Whitlock." "We have. He is agreeable, but his rights are tied to yours. The riparian line, a legal tangle." He sighed, as if burdened by her ignorance. "We are authorized to offer you a fair price, $150 for the deed. Cash. $150. Enough for a train ticket east, and nothing else. This is my land. It is not for sale. Harlan's politeness evaporated, leaving the hard bone beneath. Mrs. Carter, this is a dangerous place. We have had incidents. The Dine are restless. They blame the railroad for the drought. They have been running off stock, burned the Miller homestead north of the pass. The Millers were burned out by white men, Nell said. The words were out before she could stop them. It was a truth everyone knew, and nobody said. Men who wanted their water rights. Harlan stepped closer to the fence, close enough for her to smell the bay rum on his skin. His eyes were the color of a frozen pond. You have a sharp tongue. It is a lonely place out here. A fire could start easily. The wind is high. A woman alone. Things happen. Things happen to men, too, Mr. Harlan, even men in clean hats. He stared at her for a long moment. The silence stretched, tight as the wire she was stringing. He was measuring her. She was measuring him. The offer stands until tomorrow, he said, turning away. After that, the price goes down, or the land just gets redesignated. He mounted his horse. He and his men rode away, not fast, but with the confidence of men who owned the ground they crossed. They left the scent of sweat, horses, and the faint, metallic smell of gunpowder. Nell watched them until they were small figures in the heat haze. She knew Harlan's methods. He used the Dine, the Navajo, as his excuse. He hired crews of hard cases, dressed them up, and paid them to start the trouble that he then finished. He justified the violence by calling it civilization. She went back to work. The sun was dropping, painting the sky in violent reds and oranges. The homestead was quiet, save for the groan of Whitlock's windmill and the ping of the wire as she stretched it. This valley was a tinderbox. The settlers were squeezed between the drought and the railroad. The Dine, driven from the lowlands decades ago, were now being pushed from the high mesas as the railroad claimed the canyons. The town, 10 miles east, was the center of the rot. It was a cluster of false fronts and muddy streets, dominated by 3 buildings: the First Territorial Church, the Iron Spur Saloon, and the Army Post. The preacher, Reverend Sykes, spoke of sacrifice and progress, which always seemed to mean sacrificing the homesteads for the railroad's progress. The saloon, run by Benita Flores, was the only place to hear the truth. And the cavalry, led by Sergeant Amos Pike, only rode out when railroad property was threatened. Nell did not trust any of them. She trusted her rifle, her hands, and the fence. The rumors about the Dine were thickest in the saloon. Benita, her face lined with worry, sold whiskey to Harlan's men and listened. She told Nell what she heard. There was one man they spoke of most, a Navajo warrior. Some called him Ashki Nez, Ash. The stories about him were contradictions. Harlan's men said he was a killer, a ghost who led the raids on the supply wagons. They said he was wanted for the murder of 2 soldiers down near the border. But the few settlers who lived near the high canyons told a different story. They said he had guided a lost family back to the main road during a blizzard, leaving them with 2 of his own blankets. They said he had pulled a child from a flash flood. Then there was Sergeant Pike's version. Pike laughed and said the man was a turncoat, a cavalry scout who sold information on his own people for silver coin. Silver. That was the other part of his story. The rumor was that Ashki Nez was a silversmith of great skill. He hammered beauty out of the rock, jewelry that shone like clean water. Nell did not care. A savior, a killer, or a spy. It made no difference. He was just another man in a world of men who took what they wanted. She finished the last post as the light died. The air grew cold quickly. She pulled her coat tight. She looked at the line of barbed wire. It was a flimsy defense against men like Harlan. It was a boundary, sharp and clear. It separated her world from theirs, but it also penned her in, a prisoner of the 40 acres Tom had died for. The thirst was the only real law. The water was deep underground, a hidden promise. It was life. It was power, and Harlan wanted it. Nell stood in the twilight, a solitary figure in a vast, dry land, holding onto a piece of ground that everyone wanted, and trusting no one at all. The sun rose on a day that promised to be exactly like the one before it. The heat was already a physical weight at 6 in the morning. Nell was at the ditch, her back aching. The shared water, fed by the aquifer Harlan coveted, had slowed to a brown trickle. It took 10 minutes to fill a single bucket, the water thick with silt. She was pulling the second bucket up the muddy bank when she saw it, a heap of dark clothing, wedged in the tumbleweeds against her new fence line. It was not a dead coyote. It was a man. Her first thought was that Harlan had left one of his men, drunk, to spy on her. She set the bucket down, her hand moving to the pistol she now wore on her hip. She walked closer. He was on his stomach, half in the meager shade of a mesquite bush. He was wearing an old blue cavalry coat, far too heavy for the season. His black hair was matted with dirt and dried blood. A dark stain, still damp, spread across his left thigh. At his throat, on a leather cord, rested a small, beaded pouch, a dine medicine bag. She knelt, pressing 2 fingers to the side of his neck. A pulse, faint and rapid, beat against her skin. He was alive, but barely. She looked closer at the coat. Pinned to the collar, crookedly, was a strange badge, something she did not recognize. It was not army, not martial. It looked new, the brass too bright. Then she saw the paper. A piece of it was sticking out of the coat pocket. Her hands, rough and calloused, gently slid it free. It was a map, or part of one. It showed the valley, the mesas, and a dotted line that ran directly from Whitlock's Spring, across her property, to the railroad survey line. It was a map of the aquifer. It was exactly what Harlan wanted. It was too much. A wounded Navajo, dressed as a soldier, carrying a map of the water. It felt wrong. It felt like a trap, laid out for her to find. A sound made her look up. Hooves. Not one horse, but many, coming fast. She stood, dropping the map back onto the man. She stepped back, her hand on her pistol. As Harlan and his 6 men crested the low ridge, they were not riding casually today. They rode like men with a purpose. Harlan pulled his horse up so hard it reared slightly. His eyes were not on Nell, but on the man on the ground. A flicker of something annoyance maybe crossed his face before he smoothed it away. "Good morning, Mrs. Carter," he said, dismounting. He did not smile. Cleaning up the landscape. His men fanned out, creating a half circle around her. They all looked hard, their eyes flat. "Looks like you found a dead one," Harlan said, nudging the man with the toe of his boot. The man groaned, a low, painful sound. Harlan's eyes narrowed. He looked at Nell. "Or maybe not. Pity." He leaned down, grabbing a handful of the man's hair and yanking his head back. He studied the face, then let it drop back into the dust. "Well, I will be," Harlan said, stepping back. "We have been looking for this one." "Who is he?" Nell asked, though she already suspected. "That," Harlan said, pointing, "is Ashki Nez, the one they call Ash, a traitor to his own kind and a murderer of white men. He was a scout for the army until this morning. He shot 2 soldiers, took their rifles, and made off with a full string of supply mules." Nell looked from Harlan to the man. The cavalry coat, the blood, the story fit, just as the map fit. It all fit too perfectly. It reminded her of the way the rustling charge had fit Tom. A stray calf, a brand that was hard to read, and a man who wanted Tom's grazing rights. The accusation was the only weapon needed. "He is on my land," Nell said, her voice quiet. "He is a federal fugitive," Harlan replied, "which makes him my business. My men and I are acting as agents for the railroad, protecting its interests. An army killer is a threat to those interests. We will take him to the fort." "He is wounded," Nell said. "He needs a doctor, not a rope. He will get what he deserves." Harlan said. He nodded to two of his men. "Put him on a horse." The two men started to dismount. "No." The word was small, but it stopped them. They looked at Harlan. Harlan looked at Nell. He seemed genuinely surprised. "Ma'am, I do not think you understand the situation. This is not a request." "He is on my land," she repeated. "You are not taking him." She could feel the stinging cuts on her hands from the wire. She remembered Harlan's threat from yesterday. The water, the land, the man. It was all the same to him. Property to be taken. Harlan's patience, always a thin veneer, snapped. "Mrs. Carter, I gave you a very generous offer yesterday. You chose to be difficult. I am not in the mood for it today." He drew his pistol. It was not a fast draw, but it was deliberate. He did not aim at her. He aimed at the dirt, 3 inches from her left boot. The explosion of the shot was shockingly loud in the still morning. Dust and pebbles stung her face. The smell of sulfur filled the air. "Step aside," Harlan commanded. Nell did not move. She did not even blink. She felt a strange, cold calm settle over her. She thought of Tom, buried on the hill, dead because of a convenient lie. She would not let it happen again. Her hand, the right one, moved. It was not deliberate. It was instinct. It found the worn grip of the pistol on her hip. She drew and fired in one motion. She did not aim for his chest. She aimed for his pride. The report of her pistol was flat and sharp. Harlan's clean city hat flew from his head. It spun through the air and landed in the dusty ditch, 10 feet behind him. The world stopped. The 6 men froze, their hands hovering over their own guns. The only sound was the jingle of a horse's bit and the distant, mocking groan of Whitlock's windmill. Harlan stood perfectly still. He did not touch his head. He just stared at Nell. The look in his eyes was no longer annoyance or anger. It was something colder, something that looked a lot like murder. Slowly, deliberately. He walked to the ditch. He bent, picked up his hat, and brushed the dust from it. He looked at the neat, round hole in the front of the brim and the matching hole in the back. He put the hat back on his head, pulling it down low. "You have made a very serious mistake, Mrs. Carter," he said. His voice was soft. It was more frightening than if he had yelled. "Get off my land," Nell said. Her hand was shaking now, but her voice was rock steady. Harlan looked at the man on the ground, then back at her. He smiled, a thin, tight expression that showed his white teeth. "You want to keep him fine. You can have him for now." He turned his horse. "We will be back, dawn tomorrow. I am coming for the water, and I am coming for the man. I will have both. If you are standing in my way, I will take the land, too." He looked at his men. "Let's ride." They wheeled their horses and galloped away, leaving her in a cloud of dust and the ringing silence. The adrenaline left her, and her knees almost buckled. She was alone. She had declared war on Wade Harlan. She looked at the man at her feet. He was the cause, but he was also just a piece of the puzzle. He was the excuse. "Damn you," she whispered. But she could not leave him. She grabbed him under the arms. He was heavy, a dead weight of muscle and bone. She strained, her boots slipping in the dust, and began to drag him. Her hands screamed in protest, the cuts from the wire pulling open, stinging. She dragged him across the yard, past the empty chicken coop, and into the suffocating heat of the barn. The air inside was thick with the smell of old hay and manure. She dropped him on a pile of empty grain sacks. He was paler now, his breathing shallow. She ran to the house, grabbed the bucket of silty water, a rag, and her sewing kit. She did not have medicine, only whiskey. She brought that, too. Back in the barn, she knelt beside him. She used her knife to cut away the thick canvas of his trousers. The bullet had gone through the fleshy part of his thigh. It was a clean wound, but it had bled a lot. Too much. She poured a little of the precious water onto the rag. Her own hand was bleeding, a thin red line across her palm. She ignored it. She wiped the grime from the wound. The man's eyes snapped open. He did not yell. He stared at her. His eyes were not brown, but a deep, dark gray, the color of a storm cloud. They were full of pain, confusion, and a startling, defiant clarity. He looked at her, then at the barn, then at his leg. "Harlan," he whispered. The word was a dry rasp. "He is gone," Nell said, "for now." His eyes closed. He passed out again. Nell took a breath. She uncorked the whiskey and poured a little of it onto the open wound. The man arched off the ground with a silent scream, then fell back, unconscious. She took the needle and the thread, her hands steady, and began to stitch the torn skin together. The blood from her hand mixed with his. She worked in the dim, hot light, surrounded by the smell of dust, blood, and whiskey, with Harlan's promise echoing in her head. Dawn. She had until dawn. Nell finished the last stitch. The thread was coarse, her work clumsy, but the wound was closed. She cut the thread with the flat of her knife. The man, Ash, lay breathing in the stifling heat, his chest rising and falling in shallow movements. His skin was pale beneath its dark color, clammy with a film of sweat. The cavalry coat, a heavy blue mockery, lay beside him. She looked at the polished brass badge pinned to its collar, and the map, now tucked back into the pocket. It was a crude forgery of a surveyor's map, a setup. Harlan had laid the trap, and she had stepped into it. She walked out of the barn. The light of the mid-afternoon was blinding, the air motionless and heavy. The silence was absolute. Even the constant mournful groan of Whitlock's windmill had ceased. The wind itself had died. That was when she saw them. 3 riders. They were not Harlan's men. They sat on their ponies at the far edge of her property, just beyond the new line of barbed wire. They were dying. They wore simple cotton tunics and leggings, their black hair tied back. They carried rifles, but held them resting across their laps, not in threat, but in readiness. They did not move. They did not call out. They just watched her. This was a new weight, pressing in from another direction. Harlan was a wolf, a beast she understood. This was different. The man in the center appeared older than the other 2. His face was a landscape of canyons, carved deep by sun and wind. He possessed an authority that required no badge. Nell walked toward them, her boots scuffing the dry earth. She stopped 10 feet from the fence. "He is here," the older man said. His voice was not loud, but it carried in the dead air. He spoke clear English, clearer than many in the town. Nell nodded, her throat too dry to speak. "He is in the barn. He is wounded," she finally managed. "We know," the man said. "We have been watching from the ridge. We saw Harlan. We saw you fire your weapon." "Harlan says he is a murderer, that he shot 2 soldiers. The man's gaze was steady, unwavering. "Harlan is a snake. He speaks with a forked tongue. But the man in your barn, Ashki Nez, has broken the law of the people. He left the high country against the council of the elders. He put on the coat of the men who drove us on the long walk. He must answer for this." "He cannot answer to anyone if he bleeds to death," Nell said. "He was shot. The bullet passed through, but he has lost much blood. He is dying. We will take him. We will care for our own." The man, Ki Yazi, gestured to the others. "If you move him now, he will die," Nell said, her voice flat and final. "He is weak. The journey to the mesas will kill him before you go a mile." Ki Yazi looked at her. He had heard of the solitary widow. He had watched her that morning, stringing the sharp wire alone, her body moving with the hard rhythm of a man's labor. He had seen her stand against 6 gunmen, She was not like the others. But honor was honor. Ash had brought shame upon them, allowing himself to be found this way, dressed in the enemy's blue coat, used as a pawn in the white man's game. "He is our responsibility," Key repeated. "His honor is the honor of the people. We cannot leave him in the hands of the Bilagana." "His life is my responsibility right now." Nell countered. "I am the one who stitched the wound, and I am the one Harlan is coming back for. He gave me until dawn." Key's eyes sharpened. "Dawn? He is coming back for the man and the water. He said he will take both." Key Yazzie understood. The pieces clicked into place. Harlan was not just capturing a fugitive. He was executing his plan. He was using Ash as the public excuse to bring his guns onto her land, the land that held the water. He was creating an incident, forcing a confrontation he knew he could win. Key looked at the sky. The sun was heavy, moving west. They had perhaps 6 hours of light. Then the long, cold night. "If we leave him," Key said, his gaze shifting to the dark opening of the barn. "Harlan will take him. He will hang him in the town square. He will say the Dine are murderers. He will use it as an excuse to bring the soldiers, to push us further into the rock." "And if you take him," Nell argued, her mind racing, "Harlan will say you are protecting a killer. He will use that as an excuse. Either way, Harlan wins, unless Ash lives to speak the truth." She saw the logic land. Key was a man caught between his duty to his people and the white man's complex, dishonest rules. "He needs the night," Nell pushed, sensing the small opening. "He is burning with fever. He needs water and quiet. Give me until dawn. What Harlan promised me in threat, I ask of you in good faith. Give me until dawn. If he is alive in the morning, you can take him. If he is dead, I will tell Harlan I buried him." Key Yazzie was silent for a long time. He looked at his two companions. They said nothing, their faces impassive. The decision was his. He knew of Harlan. He knew the man planted evidence like a farmer planting corn, hoping to harvest violence. But this woman, she had defied Harlan. She was protecting a Dine, an act that could get her killed by her own people. She was either a fool, or she was something new. "You would risk this for him?" Key asked. "A man you do not know and one of us." "I would risk it for a man I do not know," Nell corrected, her voice hard. "I am tired of men like Harlan making the rules. I am tired of accusations being the same as a hanging." She thought of Tom, dead in the dust because of a convenient lie. "I am not letting Harlan have him." Key held her gaze. He saw no fear in her, only a deep, cold anger that matched the bitterness of his own people. He nodded, a slow, single motion. "Until dawn. You have until the sky turns gray." He turned his horse. "We will be close. If Harlan comes before the sun, you will not be alone." "What about Ash?" Nell asked. "If he lives, what happens then?" "If he lives," Key said, looking back at her, his face grim. "He will have much to explain. To us, and to you." He and his men did not ride away. They did not gallop off toward the mesas. They seemed to melt back into the landscape, vanishing into a dry wash that Nell had not even realized was deep enough to hide a horse. They were gone, but she knew they were there. The air felt heavy, watched. She was caught, trapped between Harlan's greed and the Dine's honor. Dawn. The word was a heavy stone in her stomach. She went back into the barn. The heat was suffocating. Ash had not moved. She took the small, beaded pouch from where it had fallen on his chest. It was filled with dry herbs and something small and hard, like a stone. She placed it on the floor next to an old tin bowl. She went to the house and used her drinking water. The precious water from the barrel, not the silty ditch water. She filled the bowl. She returned and set the bowl of clean water near his head, the medicine pouch beside it, a strange offering. Two kinds of faith, side by side. She sat on an overturned crate, her shotgun across her lap. The waiting began. An hour later, Another visitor. This one, she heard coming a mile away. The unmistakable rattle of a buckboard wagon, its wheels loose in their sockets. Nell stepped out of the barn, shotgun in hand. The wagon stopped in a cloud of dust. A woman climbed down, fanning her face with her hand. It was Mabel Carter, her sister-in-law. Mabel was Tom's younger sister, a woman who lived in town and clung to the judgments of the church and the gossip of the general store. She was pale, thin, and always looked slightly disapproving. "Eleanor," Mabel cried, her voice high and thin as a gnat's whine. "What is this I hear? They are saying you shot at Mr. Harlan, that you have taken in one of those savages." Nell sighed. The town, 10 miles of dust, and news traveled faster than a horse could run. Harlan's men had not been idle. "Hello, Mabel. It is hot for a visit." "Hot? They are saying you are going to be killed." "Mr. Harlan is a respected man. He is bringing the railroad, bringing progress, and you shot his hat off." "Are you insane?" "He threatened me. He fired first," Nell said, her voice flat. "He is trying to protect us," Mabel insisted, walking closer. She stopped abruptly when she saw the look on Nell's face, and the shotgun. "They say that Indian, the one they are hunting, the one who killed those soldiers, is here. They say you are harboring him. Eleanor, is it true?" "There is a man in the barn," Nell said. "He is wounded." Mabel's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with genuine horror. "Oh, Lord in heaven, you have lost your mind. After what they did to Tom." Nell's blood went cold. "What who did to Tom?" "Those people, the rustlers, the vagrants. This is what happens when you let the wild element in. You are a widow, alone. You should be in town, with me, not out here, consorting with—" "Consorting?" Nell's voice was dangerously quiet. "I am giving a wounded man water, Mabel, the same as I would a stray dog." "It is not the same. He is a killer." "Who says Harlan?" "Everyone says it is all over town." Mabel was twisting a white handkerchief in her hands, shredding the lace edge. "And that is not all. You have put us all in danger. You have put the whole valley at risk." "I am protecting my land. Mabel, the land Tom died for." "You are sitting on the water," Mabel snapped, her fear finally giving way to the anger beneath. "That is the real problem. You are one woman, standing in the way of progress. The church is holding a meeting tonight. Reverend Sykes himself. They are voting to cede the community water rights to the railroad, a donation for the good of the future. Old man Whitlock has already agreed. You are the only one holding out." Nell felt the trap close another inch. Harlan was not just using guns. He was using the church, the town, the law. He was isolating her, painting her as a traitor, an Indian lover, an obstacle. "So Harlan gets the water, whether I say yes or no," Nell said. "He will get it," Mabel said, her voice filled with a strange, grim satisfaction. "Because it is right. It is for the town. And you are bringing a judgment down on us. They will come for him, Eleanor, Harlan's men, and they will not be gentle. They will not care if you are Tom's widow. They will burn this place to the ground, with you in it." "Get off my land, Mabel," Mabel gasped, as if slapped. "I came here to save you, to beg you to come to your senses. Give him up. Give the land up. Come to town." "This is my home." "It is a patch of dirt," Mabel shrieked, her voice cracking. "And you are going to die for it, just like Tom did. Stubborn, both of you. Stubborn and foolish." Mabel turned, climbed back into her buckboard, and whipped the horse into a panicked run. She fled, leaving a plume of yellow dust that hung in the air long after she was gone. Nell was truly alone now. The town had turned against her. Harlan was coming. The Dine were watching. She went back into the barn. The sun was setting, filling the barn with red, bloody light that leaked through the cracks in the boards. The night would be cold. The man, Ash, was stirring. His eyes were open, no longer clear, but clouded with fever. He was muttering, not in English, but in the low, rhythmic tones of the Dine language. He saw her, and his eyes focused for a moment. He tried to sit up, his hand going to his wounded thigh, then to his throat. "My pouch," he rasped. Nell picked up the beaded bag and the bowl of water. She dipped her fingers in the water and wet his lips. Then she held the bowl for him. He drank, greedily, spilling water down his chin. His eyes fell on the medicine pouch in her hand. He held out a shaking hand for it. She gave it to him. His fingers closed around it, a lifeline. He held it against his chest. "Harlan," he said again. "He is coming back at dawn," she said. The man's eyes closed. He seemed to understand. He looked past her, toward the barn door, then at the rifle she still carried. They set me up," he whispered. His voice was a dry rattle. "The coat, the map, a trap." "I know," she said. He was silent for a moment. "He will kill you, too." "Let him try," Nell said. She sat down on the crate, the shotgun heavy across her knees. The last of the red light faded, and the barn was plunged into darkness. The countdown to dawn had begun. The barn was an oven. The dark was not a comfort. It was thick and heavy, like black wool. Nell sat on the crate, the shotgun a useless weight on her lap. Dawn was a death sentence. The man, Ash, was muttering again. The fever was in him, a fire she could not put out. She had given him all the water she could spare. It was not enough. "They were not soldiers," he whispered, his voice a dry crackle. His eyes were open, fixed on the patch of lesser dark that was the barn door. "What?" Nell leaned closer, her own voice a hush. "The men who shot me." His breathing was labored, each word costing him. "They wore the coats, blue, but the boots were wrong, Texas style, high heel, and the smell." The smell. The powder, from their rifles. It was sweet. Not the army sulfur. It was the powder the buffalo hunters use, the expensive kind. He was clearer now, the fever burning away the confusion, leaving a raw, painful clarity. "I was tracking them," he said, wincing as he shifted. "Not the army. Harlan's men. They have a supply line, hidden, up in the dry canyons. They are moving more than railroad steel. They are moving rifles, new ones." Why would Harlan move rifles? "To give to men he pays," Ash said. "To make trouble, to blame my people. I got too close. They ran me down. 4 of them." He looked at her, his dark eyes intense in the shadows. "They beat me. They had the coat, and the badge, and the map. They forced whiskey down my throat, dressed me, shot me in the leg, not to kill, just to cripple. They said, 'The widow will find you. She is the key.' They left me for you. The key, the water. It was all one plan. Harlan was not just a bully. He was a chess player, and she was a pawn on his board." She stood. "I have to get word to town, to Benita. She listens. She will know about these men." "No," Ash said, grabbing her wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong. "Dawn. Harlan comes at dawn. You cannot be here. He will not leave a witness." "I am not running," she said, pulling her arm free. "And I am not dying in your barn," he countered. Before she could answer, she heard it. A single horse, walking slow. Not Harlan's crew, not the Dine. This was a cavalry-shod horse. She moved to the crack in the barn door, her heart hammering. A man in a blue uniform dismounted, his form dark against the starlight. He walked to her front door and knocked. "Sergeant Amos Pike." Nell cursed under her breath. She checked the shotgun, then slipped out the back of the barn, circling around in the dark. "Sergeant," she called, stepping from the shadows. Pike turned, startled. He was a big man, with a face that looked soft but was hard as cured leather. He gave her a polite, almost friendly smile. "Mrs. Carter, my apologies for the late hour. I was on patrol. Heard there was a disturbance out here earlier, gunfire." "Mr. Harlan paid me a visit," Nell said, her voice flat. She did not lower the shotgun. "Ah, yes, Mr. Harlan." Pike sighed, shaking his head. "He is a man in a hurry, ma'am. He's got the railroad charter, and that makes him think he owns the territory. I try to keep a lid on him, but—" "But what? Sergeant—" "He has powerful friends," Pike said, his voice dropping, as if sharing a confidence. "Friends up in Santa Fe. A colonel. I hear he has the political pull. It makes it hard for a simple soldier like me to interfere in civilian matters." He looked past her, toward the barn. "Harlan's men are all over town, saying you ran off that fugitive, Ashki Nez." "Are they—" "They are. Say he killed 2 of my men. A terrible business." He paused. "You did not see him, did you? The report said Harlan cornered him on your property." Nell looked him straight in the eye. The lie came easily. "I saw a man. He was wounded. He ran before Harlan could get him, headed south, toward the river." Pike's gaze lingered. He looked at the dust in the yard, at the dark drag marks leading from the ditch to the barn, marks she had been too tired to scuff away. He smiled, a small, knowing twitch of his lips. "South, you say toward the river. Funny, a man shot in the leg. He could not get far in that direction. Too open, too much sand." He looked back at her. "You be careful. Mrs. Carter, Harlan, he plays for keeps, and so does the army. When one of our own is murdered, this Ash, he is worth a lot of money to Harlan, and a rope to the army. You are a long way out here, all alone." It was a warning, but not a friendly one. He was telling her the army and Harlan were one and the same. He was telling her he knew she was lying. "I can take care of myself, Sergeant," she said. "I am sure you can," Pike said, tipping his hat. "Good night, ma'am." He mounted his horse and rode away. Not fast, just a steady, deliberate walk. He knew he was part of it. The clock was ticking, louder now. She was 10 steps from the barn when another sound came. This one from the town road, a fast, desperate rattle. A mule, pushed too hard. Nell raised the shotgun again, her nerves screaming. A figure pulled up, sliding off the mule before it even stopped. Benita Flores, her black hair coming loose from its bun. A shawl clutched around her. "Chica, Dios mío, are you alive?" Benita rushed to her, grabbing her arms. "The town it is a hornet's nest. Mabel came in. She was hysterical. She said you shot at Harlan. She said you have the Dine killer in your barn." "He is in the barn," Nell said, pulling her toward the house. "But he is not a killer." I know, Benita said, her voice dropping as Nell lit a single lamp. "I have been listening. It is a setup. Nell, all of it." Nell sat her down. "Tell me." "Harlan's men. They have been buying all the dry lots, all along the aquifer, for almost nothing. They say it is for a gravel pit, but they are buying the water, not the rock." "I figured as much," Nell said. "But this is what you do not know. Old man Whitlock. Harlan has him. He has a marker, a gambling debt from 3 years ago. Harlan bought it. Whitlock has to do whatever Harlan says. Like the church meeting. Worse, the map. Nell, the map. 2 days ago, I saw Whitlock in the saloon. He was drinking, which he never does. He accidentally dropped a piece of paper. He was muttering about railroad surveyors and how he found it. One of Harlan's men, the one with the scar, he picked it up. He made a big show of it. Look at this, it's the water." "The map the man in the barn was carrying," Nell said, the last piece falling into place. "It was a copy of that. Of course Harlan staged the whole thing. He had Whitlock lose the map to make it seem real, to get the town buzzing about the waterline. Then he has his men ambush this dine, and plant a copy on him. He dumps him on your land, knowing you are the one person who will not back down. He creates a war, right here. He gets to be the hero, saving the town from a savage. And at the same time, he gets to seize your land as part of a military action. He gets the man, he gets the land, he gets the water, all at once. Nell felt sick. It was so simple and so evil. The church meeting. Benita whispered, "It is happening right now. They are voting to give the water away, for progress. Harlan is there, promising protection from the Dine threat that he himself created. They are signing it all away." Dawn. Harlan was not just coming to get Ash. He was coming to kill the evidence. He would kill them both, and the town would call him a hero. She had to move, now. She went back to the barn. Benita followed, her hand over her mouth. Ash was awake, his eyes burning with fever in the lamplight. He had heard. "The mesa," he whispered, his voice thin. "Kiyazi, he must know." "Can you ride?" Nell asked. "I can be tied to a horse." He reached inside his torn shirt, his fingers fumbling. He pulled out a small, dark object. He pressed it into her hand. It was silver. It was a pendant, hammered into the simple, perfect shape of a single drop of water. It was cool to the touch, heavy and smooth. It shone in the lamplight, a tiny, bright hope in the crushing dark. "For water," he breathed. "Show him. He will listen." Nell closed her fist around it. It was a promise. "Benita, I need your help." It took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of agonizing, muttered curses and grunts of pain. Ash was limp, his body shaking with fever and weakness. They hoisted him onto Nell's plow horse, the steadiest animal she owned. She tied his hands to the saddle horn and his feet to the stirrups. He was slumped forward, barely conscious. "Where will you go?" Benita cried, tears streaming down her face. "The mesas, it is 30 miles. You will never make it. Harlan will hunt you down. He has to find me first," Nell said. She grabbed her rifle, a canteen of water, and a sack with the last of her dried beef. "Go back to town. Tell no one you were here. Just listen." "Be safe, Chica," Benita sobbed, hugging her tight. "Be safe." Nell nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She took the horse's lead. She did not look back at the small, defiant homestead. She did not look toward the town. She looked north, toward the black, jagged line of the mesas, sharp as broken glass against the starry sky. She pulled the horse into the darkness. The moon was a sliver, offering just enough light to see the sand. The only sounds were the plodding of the horse's hooves, the creak of the leather, and the howl of a distant coyote, a lonely, mournful sound that echoed the emptiness in her own heart. She put her hand in her pocket. The silver drop was there, a cold, solid reminder of the choice she had made. She was running, not from a fight, but toward the only one that mattered. The blackness before dawn was the coldest part of the night. Nell had walked for at least 5 hours, maybe 6. Her legs were numb, her boots filled with sand. She pulled the horse, the animal's head low, its breath pluming in the air. Behind her, tied to the saddle, Ash was a barely human shape. He had been silent for the last hour, a dead weight. She was terrified that he had died, that she was dragging a corpse toward the mesas. But every time the horse stumbled, a low groan would escape him. He was still alive, trapped in the fever. The land had changed. The soft sand had given way to sharp scree and uplifted rock. She was in the foothills, the great black wall of the mesa rising up to block the stars. She did not know where she was going. She was following the cold silver of the pendant in her pocket, a desperate act of faith. She pulled the horse to a stop. Her lungs burned. She had reached a narrow canyon, a split in the rock just wide enough for a single rider. It was a dead end. I cannot, she whispered to the horse. I cannot go further. You have come far enough. The voice came from the rocks above her. Nell spun, raising her rifle, but she saw nothing. Then, 3 figures stepped out from the shadows. They were not shadows themselves, but solid men. It was Ki Yazi and his 2 companions. They had been waiting. They must have been watching her slow, desperate approach for miles. Ki looked at the sky. The east was beginning to turn a pale, sick gray. Dawn, he said. Harlan will be at your home. He will find the nest empty. He will follow, Nell said, her voice a dry croak. Let him, Ki said. He looked at the slumped figure on the horse. He is alive. He has a fever. He is weak. Ki gestured. The 2 younger men moved forward. They were efficient. Their movements economical. They cut the ropes that held Ash and, with a strength that belied their lean frames, lifted him from the saddle. They supported him between them and began to walk, disappearing back into the narrow split in the rock. Come, white woman. Ki said to Nell, you are part of this. You must hear the story, and you must tell yours. Nell led the horse and followed him into the rock. The passage was dark and winding, a natural maze. After 100 yards, it opened into a hidden basin, sheltered on all sides by sheer cliffs. A small spring, barely a trickle, fed a patch of green grass, a few hogans. The traditional dine dwellings of earth and log were set back against the cliff wall. A single fire burned, the smoke of juniper rising in a thin, clean line. Women and a few children watched from the shadows, their faces still, their eyes large. Ash was laid on a blanket near the fire. An older woman immediately knelt beside him, washing his face with water from the spring and pressing a poultice of herbs against his wounded leg. He coughed, his eyes fluttering open. He saw Ki. He saw the faces of the people. His face tightened with a shame that was deeper than his pain. You are here, Ki said, his voice flat. It was not a welcome. It was a statement of fact. I am here, Ash whispered. You wore the blue coat, Ki said. It was put on me. You were found on the white woman's land. You brought Harlan's violence to her door. That is where they left me. It was their plan. Ash struggled, trying to sit up. One of the younger men, the one who had helped carry him, put a hand on his shoulder, gently pushing him back down. Tell us, Ki commanded. Tell us why we should not give you to Harlan. Tell us why we should not cast you out for bringing this war to our sanctuary. Nell stood near the fire, her rifle still in her hand. She felt the eyes of the women on her. She was the intruder, the Bilagana. I followed them, Ash began, his voice gaining a small measure of strength from the water the woman gave him. Harlan's men, not the soldiers. They are mercenaries, hired from Texas. We know this, Ki said, but they are moving guns. Not just to arm themselves, they are caching them. Up in the high rocks, I found one of the caches, rifles, new from the east, and dynamite. An old man, his face as wrinkled as a dried apple, stepped forward. He was Hastian Sosi, an elder known for his adherence to the old ways. Guns, always guns. You meddled in the white man's affairs? That is not our path. It is our path, Ash countered, his feverish eyes flashing. Because he was planning to use them. He was going to arm a band of paid men, make them look like us, like dine raiders, and burn the ranches, burn the railroad line. He was starting a war he could blame on us. So the army would come, so they would clear the valley, clear the mesas, for his railroad. The camp was silent. This was the fear they all lived with, the memory of the long walk. The forced march that had almost destroyed them was still fresh. And the water, Ki asked quietly. I found his map, Ash said. The real one. It showed how he plans to tap the aquifer. Not just use the spring, but drain it, dry. He will kill this land, all of it, from the town to the mesas. He coughed, a dry, racking sound. I took the map. That is when they caught me. They knew I had it. They beat me. They had the coat ready. And the fake map, the one that only showed the widow's land. They put it on me. They staged it all. They staged you, Key said, his voice hard. To give Harlan the excuse to take her land, to silence her. And to silence me, Ash finished. The perfect trap. Hasti and Zosi stepped forward again, his dark eyes filled with a cold fire. He speaks of traps, but he is the trap. He shamed himself. He wore the coat of our jailers. He was captured. He brought the white woman here, to our hidden place. He has brought the Bilagana war to us. The price for this is high. He has forfeited his place. He must be given to Harlan. It is the only way to show we are not part of his fight. Several of the other men nodded. Fear was a powerful motivator. No, Key said. Zosi turned on him. He has dishonored us. He was used to dishonor us, Key corrected, his voice rising. His body was made into a lie. Harlan did this, not Ashki Nez. If we give him to Harlan, we are finishing Harlan's job for him. We are agreeing to the lie. Key looked down at Ash. You brought this trouble. You were careless, but you did not lie. The elder is right. There is a price. You will not pay it by being handed over. You will pay it by helping us end this. He looked at Nell. Both of you. Before anyone could speak, a sharp whistle echoed from the cliffs above. A lookout. Key spun, his rifle in his hand. Put out the fire, he yelled. But it was too late. The first shot rang out, the bullet ricocheting off the canyon wall with a vicious whine. Riders in the pass, the lookout shouted. Nell's blood froze. He followed me, she whispered, horrified. I led them here. Key grabbed her arm. There is no time for that. To the rocks. Chaos erupted. Women grabbed their children, pulling them toward the dark mouths of the Hogans. The Dine men fanned out, disappearing into the boulders at the narrow mouth of the basin. Nell ran with Key, dropping behind a low wall of rock. She peered over the top. At the entrance to the basin, silhouetted against the graying dawn, were at least 10 riders, and they were not holding back. They were firing as they came, pouring lead into the camp. They want to kill us all, Key said grimly, raising his rifle. Nell saw a familiar, broad-shouldered figure dismount, directing his men with hand signals. Sergeant Amos Pike. He was there, in his blue uniform, leading Harlan's mercenaries. The law itself was the outlaw. Pike! Nell yelled, her voice lost in the gunfire. One of Harlan's men, a thin, vicious-looking man with a long scar down his face, saw the Hogans. He saw where the women and children were hiding. He grinned, raised his rifle, and ran toward them, firing at the blanketed doorway. No! Nell screamed, leveling her rifle, but he was moving too fast, shielded by the rocks. A shot exploded next to her. Not from her rifle, not from Key's. She looked back. Ash. He was on one elbow, his body shaking. In his hand was a pistol. He must have taken it from one of the men who carried him. His arm was shaking badly from the fever and the weakness, but he held it with 2 hands. The man with the scar reached the Hogan door. He kicked it open, raising his rifle to fire inside. Ash fired. The sound was huge in the small basin. The man with the scar stiffened. He looked down at his chest, where a dark circle was blooming. He dropped his rifle. He fell, half in and half out of the doorway, his dead eyes staring at the children huddled inside. Ash collapsed, the pistol falling from his limp hand. The attack faltered, seeing their point man drop, and with the Dine firing accurately from hidden positions, the mercenaries pulled back. Sergeant Pike grabbed the reins of his horse. He looked directly at Nell, his face a mask of fury. He knew she had seen him. He pointed a finger at her, a clear, unspoken threat, then mounted and rode away. Harlan's men vanished as quickly as they had come. The basin was suddenly, violently silent. The only sounds were the echo of the last shot, the cry of a frightened child, and the coppery smell of gunpowder and blood mixing with the juniper smoke. Yazzie stood up. He walked over to where Ash lay, his breathing ragged. Looked at the dead man in the doorway, then back at Ash. Hasty and Sosi, the old man, came out of the shadows. He, too, looked at the dead gunman. He looked at the children who were now peering out from behind the blanket. Safe. The elder walked to Ash. He knelt. He picked up the pistol and laid it gently on the blanket. He looked at Ash, and he nodded. The debt was paid. Key looked at Nell. The shared battle, the muzzle flashes, the sight of Pike. It had changed everything. The lines were no longer red and white. They were drawn between those who defended and those who attacked. Harlan used you to find us, Key said, his voice hard, but without accusation. He wanted to kill two birds with one stone. He wanted you and he wanted us. He wanted to silence his witnesses. I am sorry, Nell said, her voice shaking. I led them to you. You did, Key agreed. And you stayed to fight. Nez spoke the truth. His honor is restored, and your fight is now our fight. This is not just about your land anymore. It is about all of us. We must stop Harlan, not just at your farm. We must stop him at the source. The ride back to town was a journey into the sun. Nell felt the heat rising from the ground, baking her through her clothes. She, Yazzie, and two of his men rode not on the main road, but through the dry arroyos, keeping to the low ground. Nez was back at the hidden basin, in the care of the old woman. His body weak, but his name cleared. They had left the body of Harlan's mercenary, the man with the scar, where he fell. They took his rifle, his pistol, and his shell casings. They had the proof. As they neared the town, the sounds of market day carried on the hot, still air, the shouting of vendors, the braying of mules, the sharp, flat sound of a hammer on an anvil. It was a normal day. But to Nell, it sounded like a scream. They rode straight onto the main street. The commerce stopped. Farmers, ranchers, and railroad men paused, their mouths open. They saw Nell Carter, a woman they knew, her face streaked with dust and gunpowder, her knuckles raw. And they saw the three dying warriors beside her, their faces implacable, their rifles held in a gesture of peace, but ready. People pulled back, clearing a path. Faces stared from the windows of the saloon, from the dark doorway of the general store. There she is, a voice shrieked. Mabel Carter stood on the boardwalk, pointing. She is with them, the heathens. They have captured her. A larger crowd was gathered at the far end of the street. In front of the First Territorial Church, Wade Harlan stood on the steps, his clean hat in his hand, his face a mask of solemn concern. He was speaking to the crowd, his voice smooth and carrying. It is a tragedy, he was saying. What has happened to Mrs. Carter, a good woman, addled by grief. We believe she was taken by the fugitive. Nez, she is a victim. She is no victim, Mabel cried, running toward him. She is a traitor. She shot at you. Harlan held up a hand, quieting the crowd. As Nell and the dying dismounted, he looked at Nell, his eyes full of fake pity. Mrs. Carter, thank God. We were just organizing a party to rescue you. Save your lies, Harlan, Nell said. Her voice was a dry rasp, but it cut through the noise. Nell, Benita Flores, pushed through the crowd, her face pale. The meeting. It is already done. The church bell began to toll, a slow, formal summons. Indeed, Harlan said, smiling. The town council, in its wisdom, has voted. The water rights are being deeded to the railroad, for the good of all. He gestured toward the open church doors. Reverend Sykes is about to announce the benediction. Please, come in. Join in the celebration of our new future. The one you built on murder, Nell said, loud enough for the first few rows to hear. Harlan's smile tightened. He ignored her, turning to go inside. Nell pushed past him, into the cool darkness of the church. Key and his men followed. Standing just inside the doors, the congregation, packed into the pews, gasped. They turned, staring at the Dine warriors, who stood silent, their presence a powerful violation of the town's unspoken rules. Reverend Sykes was at the pulpit, a sheet of paper in his hand. Sergeant Amos Pike sat in the front pew, his blue uniform immaculate, his face impassive. "This is a house of God," the Reverend stammered, his eyes wide with fear. This is not appropriate." "You are about to sign away the valley, Reverend," Nell said, walking down the aisle. "You should know what you are buying." "Mrs. Carter," Harlan said, his voice hard. "You are hysterical. You are disrupting a public meeting. Sergeant, perhaps you should escort this woman home." Pike did not move. He just watched her. "The agreement is signed," the Reverend said, his hands shaking. "All the landowners, Mr. Whitlock, we all agreed. All that is left is to file the boundary claim, which, of course, relies on your property line, Mrs. Carter. A formality." "It is not a formality," Nell said. She reached the altar. She looked out at the faces of her neighbors. She saw fear, confusion, and greed. "You have been told that the Dine are murderers," she said, her voice ringing in the rafters. "You were told they killed 2 soldiers. You were told they attacked Sergeant Pike's lawful patrol this morning." "They did," a man shouted. "Pike saw it." Nell turned to Pike. Sergeant, did you see them fire first?" Pike stood up. He was a big man, and he seemed to fill the front of the church. "Mrs. Carter, I understand you have been through an ordeal. We were fired upon by hostiles. We returned fire. It is that simple." "Is it?" Nell reached into her saddlebag, which she still carried. She threw the heavy brass shell casing onto the altar. It rolled, ringing like a small, dead bell. "This is from the rifle of one of Harlan's men, the man you were leading. Sergeant, it is loaded with sweet powder, buffalo hunter's powder. Not army issue." Pike's face did not change. "You were told," Nell continued, "that I was harboring a fugitive, that he was wearing a federal badge." She threw the crooked brass badge onto the altar. "This badge was made in a factory in St. Louis. Benita Flores checked the shipping manifests. Harlan's freight company brought in a box of 100 of them 2 months ago." A murmur went through the crowd. "This is preposterous," Harlan said, but his voice had lost its smoothness. "This morning," Nell said, her voice dropping, "Sergeant Pike led Harlan's men to a hidden Dine camp. He was not on patrol. He was there to finish a job. He was there to murder witnesses. He was there to murder me." "This is slander," Pike roared. "This woman is an Indian lover, a traitor." "He is right," Harlan shouted. Seizing the moment, his mask of civility was gone, revealing the raw fury beneath. "This woman has turned her back on her own kind. She stands with savages against progress, against the army, against God." He pointed at Key, his fingers shaking. "And she brings them here armed into your church. This is an invasion. Are you going to let them? Are you going to let her spit on your soldiers, on your faith?" "Hang her," a man in the back yelled. "Get the heathens out," Mabel shrieked, her face mottled with rage. The crowd surged forward, rising from the pews. They were a mob, their fear turning to violence. Benita and a few other homesteaders were pushed aside. Key and his 2 men stood firm. They did not raise their rifles. They did not move. They simply became a wall of silent, living judgment at the door, and the front of the mob hesitated, unwilling to be the first to charge them. "Stop." The voice was thin, watery, and full of terror. Everyone froze. Old Man Whitlock was shuffling up the side aisle, his hat clutched in his trembling hands. He looked like a ghost, his skin the color of old paper. "Mr. Whitlock," Harlan said, a predatory smile spreading across his face. Tell these good people the truth. Tell them how we all came together for the good of the town." Whitlock stopped. He looked at Harlan, then at Nell, then at the cross on the altar. He was shaking so badly he could barely stand. He... "Tell them," Harlan commanded. "He is right," Whitlock stammered. The crowd relaxed. Harlan smiled. She is right." The silence in the church was absolute. "What did you say, old man?" Harlan said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "She is telling the truth," Whitlock cried, the words tearing out of him. "All of it. It is a lie from the beginning." He turned to the stunned crowd. I am a coward. I had a debt, a gambling marker. From 3 years ago in Santa Fe, I thought it was forgotten. But he bought it." He pointed a shaking finger at Harlan. "He came to me. He said he would ruin me. He said he would take my ranch, my water, everything, unless I did what he said." "You are drunk, old man," Harlan snarled, taking a step toward him. "I am not," Whitlock shrieked, cowering back. "He made me do it. He gave me the map, the fake one. He told me to lose it in the saloon, so his man could find it. He staged it. He told me he was going to use Mrs. Carter's land as the final piece. He said she was stubborn, that she would have to be removed. For progress." The confession hung in the air, awful and undeniable. The crowd turned, a single beast, to look at Harlan. His face was white with rage. He was exposed. "Irreverent," Harlan said, his voice strangled. "This man is insane." He looked at Pike. "Sergeant, arrest this man for slander. Do your job." Sergeant Pike was not looking at Harlan. He was looking at the exit. He was looking at the dying warriors. He was trapped. His face was slick with sweat. A rifle shot cracked through the air. It was not from inside the church. It was from outside. High above them, the stained glass window of St. Michael, the one behind the altar, exploded inward. A spray of blue and red and yellow glass rained down. Old Man Whitlock screamed, clutching his chest, then looked down. He was untouched. The bullet hole was in the center of the wooden cross, 6 inches above his head. "Sniper," a man roared. "On the roof." In the tower, directly above the church, the bell began to toll. Not a summons, but a frantic, deafening, panicked clanging. Key Yazzie moved. He was not looking at Harlan. He was looking at the front pew. "Pike!" he shouted. The spot where Sergeant Pike had been standing was empty. Nell spun. To the left of the altar, a small, dark door stood open. The door to the choir loft, the door to the bell tower. Pike had slipped out during Whitlock's confession. He had not been trapped. He had been moving to his own escape. The shot was from him. He had been on the roof, trying to silence Whitlock for good, and in his haste, he had missed. Key sprinted for the tower door, his rifle in his hand. "He is getting away," Nell yelled. Harlan used the panic. As the crowd screamed and dove for the floor, he drew his pistol. He ran for the main doors, shoving people out of his path. He knocked Mabel Carter to the ground. He fired a shot into the ceiling. "Out of my way!" he bellowed. The church erupted. The crowd was a stampede, shoving, climbing over the pews, trying to escape the sniper, trying to escape Harlan, trying to escape the dying. Nell was knocked off her feet, falling against the altar. The world was reduced to screams, the smell of gunpowder, and the deafening, clanging madness of the church bell as Key and Pike began to fight in the tower above her head. Harlan was gone. swallowed by the chaos. The chaos was total. Nell was on the hard, wooden floor. The wind knocked from her lungs. She had fallen against the base of the altar, her head ringing. The air was thick with dust, the smell of sulfur, and the screams of the townspeople as they scrambled, clawed, and fought their way out of the main doors. Above everything, the bell tolled, a frantic, insane, metallic hammering. It was not ringing, it was being beaten. She could hear, even through the din, the heavy thuds and guttural yells of the fight in the tower. Key and Pike. She pushed herself up onto her elbows. Her left arm felt wet and strangely numb. She looked down. Her sleeve was dark, soaked, a shard of blue glass. Part of St. Michael's robe was embedded deep in her forearm. She must have landed on the shrapnel when she fell. She pulled herself to her feet, the world tilting. The church was almost empty now, a wreckage of overturned pews and scattered hymn books. Outside, the shouts were fading, becoming a different, more distant panic. Harlan was gone. The pain in her arm arrived, a sharp, white-hot spike. She gritted her teeth, holding the wound. She needed to get out of sight. She looked at the small door to the bell tower, where the fight still raged. Not that way. The other door, to the right of the altar, the sacristy. She stumbled toward it, leaving a small, dark trail of her own blood on the floor. She pushed the door open, fell inside, and used her good foot to kick it shut. Silence. Or near enough. The room was small, dark, and still. The air was cool and smelled of old, dry velvet, candle wax, and the faint, sweet trace of communion wine. The bell was muffled here, a distant, frantic heartbeat. She slid down the wall, her breathing ragged. She was safe. For a second. She looked at her arm. The blue glass protruded from a deep gash. Blood ran in steady drips, pooling on the floor. She tried to grip the glass with her right hand, but her fingers were slick with her own blood. She tried again, and a bolt of agony shot to her shoulder. She let out a sharp, stifled cry. Tears of pure pain, not grief, cut clean paths through the grime on her cheeks. This was the payment. This was what fighting for anything got you. She thought of Tom, bleeding out in the dust. She had told herself she was smarter, harder, but here she was, bleeding on a church floor, alone. All of it, the land, the water, the stand she had taken, it all felt useless. The bitterness rose in her throat. Love was a lie, a story told to fool children. The only truth was the land, and the blood it demanded. The doorknob turned. She froze, her heart stopping. Her pistol was still in its holster, but she could not reach it with her wounded arm, and her right hand was covered in blood. The door eased open, and a shadow filled the space. It was not Harlan. It was not Pike. It was Ash. He looked like a ghost. He was pale. His black hair stuck to his forehead with sweat. He was breathing heavily. His hand pressed hard against his own wounded thigh. He had ridden here. He must have left the mesa right after she did, pushing his wounded body past all limits. He was sick. He was weak. But he was here. He stepped inside, his eyes finding her on the floor. He shut the door and, to her surprise, turned the small iron key in the lock. They were sealed in. He did not ask if she was all right. He did not ask what happened. His eyes, burning with the last of his fever, were fixed on her arm. He saw the glass, the blood. He crossed the small room in 2 strides, his own pain ignored. He knelt in front of her. "This," he said, his voice a low rasp, "must come out." She nodded, her jaw tight, bracing for more pain. He did not hesitate. He placed his left hand on her forearm, pinning it gently but firmly to the floor. His hand was rough, calloused from his hammer and his reins. He gripped the shard of glass between his right thumb and forefinger. "Now," he said. He pulled. It was not a yank, but a single, deep, decisive draw. Nell's body arched, a silent scream trapped in her throat. The glass came free, dark and wet. He tossed it aside. The blood flowed instantly, a darker, heavier pulse. He pressed his palm flat against the wound. Hard. She gasped, the pressure agonizing. "Hold this," he commanded. She put her right hand over his, pressing down, her own fingers trembling. He moved, his motions economical, though she could see the pain it cost him to shift. He looked around the room. He saw the pitcher of water and the clean white linen cloths used for communion. He grabbed them. He came back, kneeling so close his knee touched her leg. He took one of the cloths and soaked it. "Let go," he said. She lifted her hand. He began to wash the wound, clearing the blood, his touch precise. She had long believed that love was a lie, a story about softness and promises that never survived the first drought. She had learned that survival was hard, and that all touch was either for taking or for hurting. But his hands, they were the hands of a smith, scarred and hard. Yet the way he touched her, the way he cleaned the gash, was with a tenderness that defied the man himself. It was a touch that did not ask for anything, that did not promise. It simply was. It was the gentlest thing she had ever felt. "It is clean," he said, his voice quiet. "But it is deep. It needs the needle." She looked at him, her vision blurry. "My pouch on my belt." He reached for her, his hand brushing her hip as he unfastened the leather pouch. He found her sewing kit, his fingers, which could hammer silver into the shape of a water drop. Fumbled for a moment with the small needle. He held it up to the sliver of light from the window, his hand shaking slightly, not from weakness, but from the tension in his own body. He threaded it. "This, too, will hurt," he said. "I know," she whispered. He began to sew. He worked with a strange, careful grace, his brow furrowed in concentration. The needle passed in and out of her skin. She did not watch the needle. She watched his face. She could feel his breath, warm and carrying the faint, clean scent of the herbs he chewed. He was so close. The silence in the small room was absolute, a tiny bubble of peace in the middle of the war. Outside, the world was returning. She could hear shouting, far away. "He is gone, headed to the rail yard." And in the tower, the bell had stopped. There was a final, heavy crash, and then nothing. Ash did not flinch. He continued his work, stitch by careful stitch. Nell was shaking, the shock and the pain and the sudden, terrifying quiet setting in. She could not stop it. He sensed it. He did not look up, but he began to speak. He spoke in Dine. The words were low, soft, and rhythmic. It was not a song, not a prayer, but it felt like both. It was a story, a reassurance, the sound of water flowing over smooth stones. The language was as old as the mesas, and it settled over her, a blanket in the cold. He finished the last stitch. He tied the knot and bit the thread with his teeth. He did not pull away. He looked up, his face inches from hers. His dark, fever-bright eyes met hers. He saw the tracks of her tears. He saw the fear. He saw the fight. He lifted his right hand, the one that had just sutured her flesh. He did not touch her wounded arm. He touched her face. His calloused thumb brushed the tear track, wiping away the mixture of salt and dust. Then he leaned in, slowly, and rested his forehead against hers. It was not a kiss. It was 1,000 times more intimate. She could feel the heat radiating from his skin. She could feel the fine tremor of his own exhaustion. They stayed there, for one long, suspended moment, breathing the same air. Two wounded animals, hidden in a burrow while the storm raged outside. The wall around her heart, the one she had built brick by brick over 2 bitter years, did not just crack. It dissolved. It washed away. The memory of Tom, which had been a constant, sharp pain, receded. It became a scar, not a fresh wound. This man, he had saved her, and she had saved him. He had tended to her. and she to him. This was not a lie. It was not a promise. It was just true. Her good hand came up and covered his, which was still against her cheek. Her other hand, the newly stitched one, moved to her throat, her fingers finding the silver drop he had given her. It was warm against her skin. He felt the movement. He opened his eyes. His forehead was still pressed to hers. "When you want to wash the dust from your hands," he whispered, his voice a rough vibration that she felt in her bones. "Remember the source." She understood. He was not talking about the aquifer. She closed her eyes, a single tear escaping, and nodded. A heavy boot kicked the sacristy door. The lock held. "She is in here or Pike," a man shouted from the church. "Get the bar." Ash pulled back. The moment was gone. The world had found them. He moved to his feet, stifling a groan, and pulled her up with his good arm. He was unsteady, but his grip was iron. "Harlan," he said, "he is not done." "The rail yard," Nell said, her voice clear, her resolve returning, hard as steel. "He is going for the dynamite." Ash looked at the door. It shuddered as something heavy hit it from the other side. He looked at the small, high window that led to the alley behind the church. "We are not done, either," he said. He grabbed a heavy wooden chair, jammed it under the doorknob, and then moved to the window. The fight was not over. It had only moved. The alley behind the church smelled of stale beer and dust. Ash boosted Nell up to the high, narrow window. Her wounded arm screamed in protest, the fresh stitches pulling, but she bit back the cry. She tumbled out, landing hard on the packed earth of the alley. Ash followed, his movement stiff with pain. He landed, his bad leg collapsing, and he leaned against the adobe wall, his breath hissing through his teeth. The town was a mess of noise. Men were shouting, running, not toward the church, but east, toward the railroad yard. "To the yard, Harlan's men are holding the depot." "He is spinning it," Nell said, reloading her pistol with her good hand. "He is painting himself as the victim." "He is not a victim," a low voice said. Ki Yazi stepped from the shadows of the bell tower entrance. His face was bruised, and he had a long cut over his eye. But he was alive. "Pike," Nell asked. "He is a cat. He landed on his feet and ran," Ki said, disgust in his voice. "He went to Harlan. They are together. My men are watching. They have moved the dynamite from the depot." "Where?" Ash asked, pushing himself off the wall. "To the source," Ki said. "To the spring, on Whitlock's land." "He is going to do it," Nell whispered, the cold realization dousing the heat of her anger. "He is not just running. He is going to finish the job. He will blow the aquifer, divert the water, and destroy the valley. He will erase the proof, the homesteads, and the mesa, all at once." "Nell," Benita Flores ran into the alley, her face a mask of terror. They have guards at the rail yard. Harlan is telling everyone the Dine set fire to the church, that they are trying to seize the rail line." "He is creating his war," Ki said. "Then he will have one," Nell said. They slipped through the back alleys, moving like rats in a maze, until they reached the dark, safe cellar beneath Benita's saloon. The air was cool and smelled of earth and whiskey. They waited. The sun went down. The chaotic noise of the day turned into the tense, false calm of a town under occupation. Harlan's mercenaries, now wearing the false brass badges, patrolled the streets. Night came, absolute and black, with only a sliver of moon. In the cellar, by the light of a single, shielded candle, Nell laid out the plan. She spoke in a low, intense whisper. "He will be at the springhead, on Whitlock's land, right where it borders mine. He thinks we are dead or hiding in the mesas. He will not expect us. My men are in the hills." Ki said, "We can fight." "Not head on," Nell said. "He has the dynamite. We cannot risk a stray shot. We have to use the land, my land." She looked at Key. Pike will be with him. He will lead the patrol. Key confirmed. Good. Nell turned to Benita. We need a diversion, a real one this time. The rail station, Benita said, her dark eyes flashing. The new one. It is full of Harlan's dry timber and his payroll. A fire there will bring them running. How will you know when? Key asked. Nell looked at Ash. He understood. He reached into his shirt and pulled out the silver pendant, the drop of water. He handed it to Key. I will be on the ridge overlooking the town. Key said, when you are in position, I will use this. The moon is small, but it will be enough. When you see the fire, Benita, you will know we are moving on Pike. Nell turned to Ash. You and I, we go for Harlan. We go for the dynamite. You are wounded, Ash said. It was a statement, not a question. So are you, she replied. We are a matched pair. An hour before midnight, they moved. Key vanished into the rocks, the silver pendant heavy in his hand. Benita slipped back toward the rail station, a small can of kerosene hidden under her shawl. Nell and Ash moved west, toward her homestead. They did not go to the house. They went to the new fence line, the one that separated her land from Whitlock's. It was dark. The air was cold. The only sound was the wind, whistling through the wire. He will have guards, Ash whispered, kneeling. His leg was stiff, and he moved with a pronounced limp. I know, Nell said. She had a bucket of water from Benita's well. She dipped a rag in it and began to wipe wet sand onto the fence posts, marking a narrow, invisible path in the dark. But he does not know this land. I do. They saw a flicker from the ridge, a tiny spark, reflecting the moonlight. Once, twice, 3 times. Key was in position. They waited. 10 minutes later, the sky to the east lit up with a dull, orange glow. A fire. Benita had done her job. Shouts echoed across the valley from the town. Horses galloped, their hoofbeats fading as Harlan's men raced to save their station. Almost immediately, another sound. A brief, sharp fight from the ridge nearest the spring. A single shot, muffled. A man's scream. Cut short. Key had met Pike's patrol. Now, Nell said. She and Ash moved, following the wet sand markers. They slipped through the barbed wire fence she had built. They were on Whitlock's land. Ahead of them, a single lantern burned in the dark, marking the small wooden shed where the dynamite was stored. The spring head was just beyond it. 2 men stood guard, their rifles held loosely. They were distracted by the glow from the town. Ash picked up a rock the size of his fist. He did not throw it. He moved like a shadow, his bad leg making no sound in the sand. He came up behind the first man and struck him, once, at the base of the skull. The man collapsed without a sound. The second man turned, hearing the body fall. What? Nell was already moving. She brought the butt of her rifle up, swinging it with her good arm, catching him under the chin. He fell, stunned. They reached the shed. The door was open. Wade Harlan was inside, kneeling on the floor. He was not alone. The shed was packed, crate upon crate, with sticks of dynamite. A long fuse was already laid. Running from the largest stack, out the door, and toward the springhead. Harlan was calmly attaching a blasting cap. He looked up as they filled the doorway, his face illuminated by the single lantern on the floor. He did not look surprised. He smiled. The widow, he said, his voice calm. And the savage. I should have known you two would find each other. You are both animals, clinging to the dirt. It is over. Harlan, Nell said, leveling her rifle. Her arm ached, and the weapon felt impossibly heavy. Over. Harlan stood up. He kicked a barrel, and the smell of oil filled the air. The floor, she saw, was dark and slick with it. It is just beginning. Mrs. Carter. Your men are gone, Harlan, Ash said, his pistol steady, aimed at the man's chest. Pike is taken. The town knows the truth. The town, Harlan laughed, a dry, bitter sound. The town is a collection of sheep. They will believe whatever story the winner tells, and I am the winner. He gestured to the dynamite. This valley is dying. It is choking on nostalgia, on old fools like Whitlock, on heathens who will not change, on stubborn women who will not sell. He was confessing, he was bragging. Do you have any idea what this railroad means? He snarled, his clean hat gone, his hair plastered to his head with sweat. It is the future. It is an artery of steel and commerce. It is progress. And you are standing in the way. You are a murderer, Nell said. I am a builder, he roared. And sometimes, to build something new, you have to burn the old ground. You have to blast it clean. If the aquifer moves, so be it. If the mesas dry up, let them. This is a new age, and it has no room for you. He kicked the lantern. It was not an accident. He kicked it deliberately. The glass shattered, and the lit wick fell directly into the pool of oil. The world exploded in light. A sheet of flame flashed across the floor. Igniting the oil, the fuse, which Harlan had laid, caught instantly. It began to hiss, a terrifying, fast-moving snake of sparks, racing toward the stacks of dynamite. Harlan laughed, a high, thin sound in the roar of the fire. Progress. Widow, we will all see it together. He did not run for the door. He lunged at Nell, his arms wide, trying to tackle her, to hold her in the burning shed. He would take them with him. Ash fired his pistol. The shot went wide as Harlan slammed into him. Ash, his bad leg giving way, fell. Harlan was on him, his hands grabbing for Ash's throat. The fuse was 3 feet from the dynamite. Nell did not hesitate. Her arm was on fire, but she raised the rifle like a club and brought it down on the back of Harlan's head. The stock connected with a wet, heavy crack. Harlan stiffened, his grip on Ash loosening. Ash, now! Nell screamed, grabbing the front of his shirt. She pulled him, dragging him backward toward the door. The shed was an inferno. The heat was scorching, blistering her skin. Ash scrambled, pushing with his good leg. Go, go! He shoved her out of the doorway. She fell, rolling, into the sand. Ash threw himself after her, his body landing half on top of hers. The fuse disappeared. For 1 second, there was no sound at all. Then the world ended. A white light filled her vision. The sound was not a sound. It was a physical blow that punched the air from her lungs. The ground lifted, throwing them, tossing them like dolls. Wood, rock, and fire rained down around them. The night sky turned red. Then silence, a ringing, painful void. Nell gasped, her lungs filling with sulfur and dust. She was alive. She pushed herself up. Her head was spinning. She looked down. Ash was beside her, his face pale, his eyes closed, but he was breathing. The shed was gone. A smoking black crater marked where it had been. The springhead, 20 yards away, was buried in rock, but the flow of water, she could hear, was already pushing through. The blast had gone up, not sideways. The aquifer was safe. A low, terrible sound came from the darkness, a wet, choking groan. Key Yazzie and his men appeared, materializing from the smoke. They were dragging Sergeant Pike, who was bound and gagged. Key stopped, looking at the crater, then at Nell. Nell pointed into the darkness, toward the sound. Key raised his own lantern. Wade Harlan was not dead. The blast had thrown him, clear of the fire. It had thrown him 30 feet, directly into the new fence line Nell had strung. He was caught. He was tangled, twisted in the barbed wire. A dozen metal thorns pierced his clothes and his skin. He was alive, but he was trapped. He was chained, as Key had said, by the very lines he had drawn. He pulled, and the barbs dug deeper, ripping his flesh. He let out a low, animal sound. Key said, "A man who loves fences should not be afraid to wear one." He gestured to his men. They surrounded Harlan, their rifles ready. The fight was over. The ringing in Nell's ears was a high, thin whine, a ghost of the explosion. The air was unbreathable, a thick soup of sulfur, scorched rock, and burning pine. She lay on the ground, the sand still vibrating beneath her, and tasted grit on her teeth. She was alive. Beside her, Ash coughed, a dry, racking sound. He pushed himself onto one elbow, his face a pale mask in the flickering light of the burning debris. His leg was outstretched, his face tight with pain, but his eyes were clear. From the darkness, Kiyazi approached. His lantern cut a swinging yellow circle in the smoke. He was dragging Sergeant Pike, who was bound at the wrists and gagged with his own neckerchief. Pike's eyes were wide, white, and frantic. "It is done," Key said. His voice was flat. A sound came from the darkness, a low, wet, animal-like growl. Key raised his lantern higher. The light fell upon the twisted wreckage of the new barbed wire fence. Wade Harlan was there, caught like a rabbit in a snare. The blast had thrown him, a heavy, brutal force, directly into the fence. The barbs had pierced his coat, his shirt, his flesh. He was tangled, crucified on the wire, his arms spread wide, his feet kicking uselessly at the ground. He was bleeding from a dozen small wounds. He saw them watching, and he cursed, the words a choked, bubbling sound. Key's men, their rifles steady, moved to surround him. They used their knives to cut him free, but the process was not gentle. The barbs tore. Harlan screamed, a thin, high sound. They bound his hands and feet and threw him on the ground next to Pike. The two architects of the valley's ruin lay side by side in the dust, defeated. The return to town was a slow, agonizing march. The adrenaline had bled out of Nell, leaving a deep, throbbing ache in her arm, and an exhaustion so profound she could barely lift her feet. Ash walked beside her, his limp heavy, one hand resting on her good shoulder for balance. She, in turn, leaned on him. They moved as one wounded, exhausted creature. Ahead of them, Key and his men marched their two prisoners. As they reached the main street, the real dawn was breaking. The sky was a pale, clean gray. The town was already awake. Benita's fire at the rail station was a smoking, blackened ruin. The townspeople were gathered there, staring at the destruction, their faces grim. They turned as the procession came up the street. They saw Harlan and Pike, bound. They saw Kiyazi and his warriors, walking not as raiders, but as guards. And they saw Nell and Ash, covered in soot and blood, their clothes torn, but walking. A murmur ran through the crowd. This was not the story Harlan had told. "What is this?" the Reverend Sykes asked, his voice trembling. He stood near Mabel, who looked as if she had seen a ghost. Old Man Whitlock pushed through the crowd. He looked at Harlan, who was now being held by Key in the center of the street. The old man's fear was gone, burned away by the night's events. "That," Whitlock said, his voice ringing with a new, hard clarity, "is the man who tried to steal our water. And that," he pointed to Pike, "is the man who helped him." Before Harlan could reply, before a mob could form, a new sound came. More riders, 6 of them, wearing official dusters and badges Nell did not recognize. They were not local. They were territorial marshals, hard, lean men who had ridden fast. "We heard the explosion," the lead marshal said, his eyes taking in the scene. He looked at the smoking depot, the bound soldiers, the armed Dane, and the 2 wounded civilians. "Someone want to tell me what kind of war has started here?" Whitlock spoke first. His confession, this time, was not a fearful shriek, but a steady, damning account. He told them about the debt, the threats, the fake map, the plan to remove Nell. Benita stepped forward, holding her ledger. And I have the shipping manifests. Marshal. For the fake badges. For the dynamite. It all came in under Harlan's freight company. The marshal looked at Sergeant Pike. Soldier, you are in a world of trouble. Pike, his face gray with defeat, looked at Harlan, who stared at the ground. Pike knew it was over. He collapsed. It was him, he yelled, the words muffled by the gag. Key pulled it free. It was Harlan, all of it. He had a colonel. He had orders. He said it was for progress. I was just following orders. The marshal looked at Harlan. Mr. Harlan. Harlan raised his head. He looked past the marshal, past the crowd. He looked at Nell. His eyes were not defeated. They were full of pure, cold hatred. He said nothing. That's enough for me, the marshal said. He dismounted. We will take them to Santa Fe. They will stand trial for conspiracy, attempted murder, and theft of Army property. He and his men took Pike and Harlan, chaining them properly. A wagon was found. The two men were loaded into it, not hanged from a tree, not shot in the street. They were taken by the law, the slow, cold paper law that had finally, sluggishly, arrived. As the wagon rattled away, the town stood in the street, surrounded by the wreckage of their own fear and greed. The Reverend Sykes looked at the ground, then at the bullet-scarred cross in his church. The donation, he stammered. The vote. It is invalid. It is more than invalid, Reverend, Old Man Whitlock said. He walked to the church steps. I was a fool, a coward. I let that man use me to threaten my own neighbors. He looked at Nell. This land, this water, it is not ours to sell. It is ours to guard. He took a deep breath. I am deeding my well, my spring, and all my primary aquifer rights to a community trust, effective immediately. The water will belong to the town. A ragged cheer started, but Nell held up her good hand. The crowd quieted. If it belongs to the town, she said, her voice aching, then it must belong to the whole community. She looked at Key, who had stood back, watching. The trust must be fair. A portion for the homesteads, a portion for the town, and a protected portion for the din to ensure the springs on the mesa never run dry. The crowd hesitated. It was a radical idea. She is right, Benita said, standing beside Nell. They fought for it, same as her. They have a right. Whitlock, his face set, nodded. She is right. He looked at the Reverend. Draw up the new papers. That is the only way I will sign. The town, shamed and grateful, agreed. The railroad would not get its monopoly. The valley would share. Later, the crowd thinned. People came up to Nell one by one. They did not say much. A farmer touched the brim of his hat. A woman, one who had glared at her just the day before, pressed a small tin of salve into her hand. Mabel pushed through. She looked at Nell's filthy, blood-stained dress, at the crude stitches in her arm. Her face was pale. She did not apologize. But she said, You are a mess. Eleanor, you should come to my house. I have clean bandages and broth. Nell shook her head. Thank you, Mabel, but I am going home. Benita came last. She did not say a word. She just opened her arms and hugged Nell fiercely, holding her as she shook with exhaustion. You did it, Chica, she whispered, her own tears wetting Nell's hair. You did it. Nell pulled away and looked for Ash. He was standing near the horses. Apart from the town, Key Yazzie was with him. You fought as a Dine, Key said, his voice low, for Ash alone. You spoke the truth. You defended the children. Your honor is clean. He motioned to the high purple mesas, sharp against the morning sky. There is a place for you by our fire. Ashki Nez. You are welcome. You are home. Key paused, his gaze thoughtful. But a man's honor is one thing. The field of his heart is another. You must choose where you plant your seeds. Key looked at Nell, a long, deep look of respect. He nodded. Once, to her. Then he and his men mounted their horses. They did not ride out like a defeated enemy. They rode out like guardians, their heads high, and vanished into the foothills. Ash was left standing alone, a man of two worlds, belonging to neither. Nell walked toward him. He looked at her, his dark eyes full of exhaustion, and a question he would not ask. She did not speak. She just gestured with her head toward her homestead. They walked the long miles home. They did not talk. There was nothing left to say. When they arrived, the homestead was just as she had left it. Quiet, defiant, and her own. The air was clear. She went to the ditch. The water, fed by the newly cleared spring, was running faster now, and cleaner. She filled a tin basin. She set it on the porch. She looked at her arm, at the grime and the dried blood. She looked at Ash, who stood stiffly, his own leg caked in dust. She unhooked the silver pendant from her neck. It was covered in grime, and a single dark speck of dried blood was on its smooth surface. With her good hand, she dipped it into the basin. She rubbed the silver between her thumb and forefinger. The soot and blood washed away, revealing the clean, bright metal beneath. It shone, brilliant in the new morning light. She did not put it back on. She walked into her small, dark house. She went to the single window, the one that faced east. She hung the silver drop on a small, rusted nail in the wooden frame. The sun, now climbing, struck it. A small, perfect, shimmering drop of light was cast on the far wall, dancing as the pendant gently spun. It was a single, pure point of brightness in the shadows, a promise of water, a sign of the source. The air was cold, and the silence that followed the explosion was heavier than the smoke. Nell and Ash sat on the porch of her small house, the gray light of dawn washing the soot from the sky. They had not spoken. There were no words for what had happened. They were both wounded, both exhausted. The stitches in her arm throbbed with a dull, persistent pain. His leg was stiff, the muscle torn anew by the fight and the fall. She brought out the basin of clean water from the barrel. She set it between them. He looked at it, then at her. "Your arm," he said. His voice was a raw whisper. "Your leg," she replied. He dipped a clean rag into the water. He held it out. She took it, and she began to wipe the sulfur and grime from the wound on his thigh, redressing the bandage with the clean cloths Mabel had given her. When she was finished, she handed the rag back to him. He took it, and his rough, scarred fingers were impossibly gentle as he washed the soot from her stitches and applied the salve the townswoman had given her. Their hands met. They did not linger. It was a simple, necessary exchange. He stayed. He slept on the cot in the main room, a sleep so deep it was like a small death. He slept for a day and a night, the fever finally burning itself out. Nell sat on the porch, her shotgun across her knees, watching. But the valley was quiet. The war was over. When he awoke, the air was clear. The wind had shifted, bringing the smell of rain from the high mesas. He was weak, but his eyes were clear. "Key will be waiting," he said, sitting up. "He knows where you are," Nell said. She was at her stove, stirring a thin cornmeal mush. He stayed another day, testing his leg in the yard. He walked with a limp that she knew would never truly leave him, a permanent reminder. On the third day, he began to work. He did not pack to leave. He walked to her husband's old forge. It was rusted, the bellows cracked, the anvil silent. He looked at it for a long time. Then he began to clean. Nell watched him from the kitchen window. He was a man who could not be still. He needed to build. He began to repair the forge, using her tools, using adobe mud from the ditch and old timbers from the collapsed chicken coop. She went out. "What are you doing?" "Working," he said, not looking up. He was relacing the bellows with a thin strip of leather. There is no silver. I have some, he said. And the settlers. They need things. Plows mended, horses shod. The town is still there. The work is still there. He was not leaving. He was not asking to stay. He was simply being... A week later, Ki Yazi rode down from the mesa. He stopped his horse at the edge of the property, his eyes taking in the scene Nell, planting new rows of cotton near the ditch. Ash, his face stained with soot, hammering a red-hot piece of iron on the anvil. The sound, a high, clear ping, 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 was the new heartbeat of the homestead. You are a smith, Ki said, dismounting. I am, Ash replied. Your place is with the people. We are building too. We need your voice. Ash set the hammer down. He looked at the forge he had built. He looked at Nell, who had stopped her work to watch them. My voice is here, he said. I will be the bridge. I will come to the mesa, but I will stay here. Ki looked at the small, defiant patch of land. He understood. The field of the heart, he said, nodding. It is a hard field to plow. He unslung a heavy leather bag from his pony. From the elders, they say, the white men have their iron, but the Dine have the stone. We will trade silver for your iron. Ash took the bag. It was heavy with raw turquoise and lumps of silver ore. The rains came, a long, soft, soaking rain that lasted for 3 days. The ditch overflowed, the water running clean and fast, washing the last of the ash away. The valley drank, and the air smelled of wet creosote and new life. Nell and Ash were enclosed in the small cabin, the sound of the rain a constant drum on the tin roof. They did not talk much. There was no need. She mended harnesses. The stitches in her arm now healed to a pale, thin scar. He sat at her table, working the silver ore with a small hammer, shaping it. The silence was not empty. It was full. She found herself learning from him. Hozho, a word he used often. It meant balance, harmony, beauty. He found it in his work. She found herself trying to find it in hers. When the rain stopped, she walked out to the fence line, near the ditch. She looked at the tangle of barbed wire where Harlan had met his end. It was a monument to greed, a rusty, vicious thing. She took her wire cutters from the barn. She began to cut. Ash came and watched her. She did not just repair the gap. She removed a 30-foot section of the fence, pulling the posts from the wet earth, her muscles straining. She was opening the land, leaving a clear, wide path to the shared water. It is open now, she said, breathing hard. He nodded. Hozho. The forge became a fixture. The smithy, built of adobe and salvaged wood, was always warm. Ash's work became known. He made tools for the homesteaders, knives and hatchets, mended hinges and wagon wheels. But he also worked the silver. He made jewelry, not for the fancy women in the East, but for the people of the valley. He hammered the silver into new shapes, patterns he said he saw in the sky, heavy, rolling storm clouds, the sharp, clean lines of a lightning strike, and always the single, perfect, polished drop of water. Orders came from the town. Benita brought them. Orders came from the mesa. Ki brought them. Settlers and Dine met at his forge, trading tobacco and wool for tools and silver. The forge was not just a workshop. It was a meeting place, the bridge he had promised to be. Their life fell into a rhythm, marked by the seasons. They never spoke of the future. They never spoke of love. Love was not a grand promise. It was not a declaration. It was the list of chores they shared. It was the quiet meals, the unspoken understanding. It was the way he limped out to the well to draw water for her in the morning, so she would not have to. It was the way she mended his worn shirts, her stitches small and neat. It was in their hands. In the evening, when the work was done, they would wash the day's tools at the ditch, their hands meeting in the cold, clear water. His rough, scarred hand would brush hers, scarred in its own way, a brief, simple contact, an assurance, a daily, Repeated action. The valley healed. The railroad finished its line, but it built around the community trust, not through it. The town grew, but it grew around the water, not on top of it. One evening, in the late fall, Nell stood on the porch. The cotton was harvested, the pantry full, the sun was setting, a deep bloody red spilling over the western mesas. The air was crisp and clean. Her sleeve was rolled up in the soft light. The scar on her arm was a pale, silvery line. Ash came out of the forge, wiping his hands on a rag. He smelled of coal smoke and iron. He came to stand beside her, not touching, just sharing the same small space, watching the same sky. He was silent for a long time. Then, he lifted his right hand, the hand that had held a pistol, that had hammered silver, that had sewn her skin shut. He did not touch her face. He did not take her hand. He gently laid his fingers over the scar on her arm. His touch was warm, solid. His thumb moved, slowly, tracing the healed line. It was a question, an acknowledgement, and an answer, all at once. Nell looked at his dark hand on her arm. She thought of the cold, bitter woman who had strung wire and believed in nothing. She thought of the promise she had made to herself, that love was a lie told to keep people weak. She looked at the man beside her. She felt the solid truth of his touch. She heard the sound of the water, running freely in the ditch, in the window. The silver drop spun, catching the last ray of the sun, casting a small, bright star onto the floor. She let out a breath she had held for a very long time. Love was not a lie. She turned her face to the darkening sky. It was daily work. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I am curious. Where in the world are you listening from? Let me know in the comments. Share your thoughts and connect with fellow fans. If you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe to my channel, Wild West Tales, and give this video a like. And if you really loved it, please hit that hype button. It helps more than you know, and ensures these stories get heard by more people, just like you.